Open your refrigerator right now. Look at everything inside it. Every piece of meat in there arrived already dead. The chicken, the beef, the pork. Not one animal in your kitchen was killed by you, in your kitchen, minutes before dinner. That is the arrangement almost every human on Earth has quietly agreed to. Then there is the lobster, dropped in the boiling water while still moving, in restaurants, in home kitchens, in television cooking segments. So why this one animal? The answer is not one reason. It is a stack of forces, and they all point the same direction. Start with the one that actually built the tradition: spoilage. A lobster is not like a cow or a pig. Its flesh begins breaking down remarkably fast once the animal dies. Here is the mechanism. Lobsters carry powerful digestive enzymes in their gut. When the animal dies, those enzymes do not politely stop working. They keep going, and they start digesting the lobster itself from the inside out. That process moves fast. Within hours, texture and flavor degrade noticeably. A dead lobster left at room temperature becomes genuinely risky to eat, and the bacteria involved can survive cooking. So the food safety logic became simple. Keep it alive until the last possible second. But spoilage alone does not explain the boiling pot. Plenty of foods spoil fast. We invented refrigeration for exactly that reason. Which raises the obvious question: why did that solution never fully arrive for lobster? Part of the answer is that lobsters do not freeze well raw. Ice crystals wreck the delicate muscle structure. The meat turns mushy, and it sticks stubbornly to the shell. The industry solved this eventually, and this is where it gets interesting. Modern processors use high-pressure processing. The lobster is subjected to enormous water pressure, which kills it and pops the meat cleanly out of the shell in one step. That technology works beautifully. It is used commercially at scale today. Yet, walk into a seafood restaurant and you will still find a tank of live lobsters by the door. The technology solved the problem, and the tradition simply ignored it. So the practical reason came first, and then it stopped being the reason. Which brings us to the harder question. What is actually happening to the animal in that pot? For decades, the standard answer was comforting. Lobsters do not feel pain. They lack a brain in the way we understand one. Their nervous system is a chain of small clusters called ganglia, spread along the body rather than centralized in a skull. That was the science, and it was genuinely believed. Then, the research got more careful. Here is what changed. Scientists began distinguishing between two different things: nociception, which is detecting damage, and pain, which is the unpleasant experience of it. A machine can detect damage. Only an experiencing creature can suffer. Crustaceans clearly have nociception. The debate is whether anything is home to feel it, and the evidence has been shifting. Researchers found that some crustaceans learn to avoid places where they were shocked. They tend wounds. They trade off between avoiding harm and getting food, which suggests weighing rather than reflex. That is not proof of suffering. It is the kind of behavior that makes reflex a harder explanation to defend. In 2021, the United Kingdom government commissioned an independent review of the evidence. The reviewers concluded that decapod crustaceans, the group including lobsters and crabs, should be regarded as sentient. Britain then added them to its Animal Welfare Sentience Act. Switzerland went further, earlier. In 2018, Swiss regulations required that lobsters be stunned before being killed. New Zealand and Norway have their own rules in this territory. To be fair to the other side, this remains contested. Some researchers argue the behavioral evidence is being overread. Scientists are still untangling how much of that is real experience and how much is sophisticated machinery. That uncertainty is honest, and it matters. Notice what the twitching does not prove. A lobster's tail flips violently in hot water, and that looks like agony. But that flip is a well-documented escape reflex, wired into the tail's own nerve chain. It can happen without any central experience at all. Which cuts both ways. The thrashing is not evidence of suffering. It is also not evidence against it. And that ambiguity is exactly why the practice survived so long unexamined. Now, go back further, because the strangest part is not the biology. It is the history. We assume lobster was always luxury. It was not. In colonial New England, lobster was so abundant that storms would pile them on beaches in drifts. It was cheap protein, food for the poor, for prisoners, for indentured servants. The stories about servants demanding contracts limiting lobster meals are widely repeated. That story sits closer to legend than verified lab result, and historians treat it carefully. What is solid is the shape of the thing. Lobster was low-status food, and canneries fed it to people who had few options. Then, the railroads changed everything. Inland passengers were served lobster without being told what it was. They loved it. Fresh coastal lobster became a novelty, then a delicacy, then a price tag. And here's the part that should really stop you. The kill method never updated. It came along from the era when lobsters were peasant food, handled quickly by the barrel, and it rode straight into white tablecloth restaurants, unchanged. That is the culture layer. We are performing a fishing village technique inside a luxury dining room. The pot stayed the same while everything around it transformed. There is one more force, and it is psychological. Distance. Almost every animal we eat is killed somewhere we cannot see, by someone we will never meet, and it arrives as a package. The lobster breaks that arrangement completely. You choose it from a tank, you carry it to the pot, you are the last link in the chain instead of the invisible end of it. That should feel worse. Strangely, it often does not, because the lobster does not look like us. No expressive face, no sound we read as distress. Our empathy machinery runs on eyes and vocal cords, and a lobster provides neither. Now the exceptions, and they prove the rule rather than break it. Skilled cooks and some regulations use a different method. A knife driven quickly through the head, splitting the nerve chain before cooking. Others chill the lobster first. Roughly 30 minutes in ice slurry or a freezer makes the animal sluggish and unresponsive, so the kill happens on a body that is barely reacting. Some researchers question whether cold genuinely dulls experience or just immobilizes the animal. The debate continues. Why do these methods stay rare? Because they require skill, time, and a willingness to handle death directly. The boiling pot is popular for a reason that has nothing to do with the lobster. It is easy, and it lets the cook look away. That is not a counterexample. That is the rule confirming itself. So stack it up. An animal that spoils faster than almost anything else on the menu. A freezing problem that took a century to solve. A nervous system so unfamiliar that we assumed nobody was home. A history that dragged a barrel handling technique into fine dining. And a body plan that gives our empathy nothing to grab onto. Any one of those forces alone would have been overcome. Together, they made the boiling pot feel normal. Not chosen, just never questioned. And that is what makes this such a clean example of how tradition works. Practices do not survive because they are the best available option. They survive because nothing ever forced a review. The technology to do this differently already exists. High-pressure processing is real. Stunning devices are commercially available. Several countries have written the change into law. What is missing is not capability. It is attention. Maybe the bigger lesson here is not about lobsters at all. Most of what we do daily was optimized for a world that no longer exists. The reason gets forgotten, the habit stays, and we call the leftover a tradition. So open your refrigerator again. Every item in there is the end of a story you were not asked to witness. The lobster is simply the one that arrives still telling.